You're watching HCAM TV.
Hello, Hopkinton, and welcome to a brand new live edition of the Hopkinton Hangout Hour. I will be your host for this afternoon, Jim Cousins, along with my co-host, Bob Hamilton. And today we'll be talking in the second half of our hour with Sean Mccollum from the Board of Health, what is going on with COVID. But in the first half hour, we have Karen Bograd from the Scouts, who's going to be talking to us about scouting for food and a few other things that she's involved with. She has a lot of roles that she does there. So Karen and Bob, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right. So let us start, Karen, with what's happening right now, scouting for food.
So I
If
thought
anybody
it was
hasn't heard about it in a nutshell, what's it all about?
So I thought it was really important for us to come on air and talk about scouting for food. Scouting for food is really about taking care of our neighbors who are in need. And as you know, our Hopkinton Food Pantry is located at Project Just Because over on South Street. And this time of year, we see that food pantry get very empty. And this goes on every year. And every year we run a food drive called Scouting for Food. It's actually a Boy Scout program that was started in Hopkinton itself many years ago by Pete McGregor, for some of those who might remember an old name. And that was like the late 80s when he started it. And right now it still serves a huge need. We really have to fill the shelves of the food pantry so they can make it through the holiday season, Thanksgiving in particular, Christmas, the winter months, just to get food on the shelves so they can distribute it to people who are in need. And certainly this year has presented more challenges that were unexpected for so many people, that the need is very great. So the Scouts coordinated with the Mayflower Council. Mayflower Council is the Boy Scout Council, and they actually choose the dates every year. So once we hear the dates, then we start our committee rolling and start to coordinate this event. So right now we've had to make some considerations. Our first consideration was to get some information out to the Board of Health and talk to them just to make sure that they were comfortable with us running the drive. So our biggest change this year is the fact that we cannot allow anyone to enter the building at Project Just Because. Normally we do all the sorting on location, all the food would come in there and it would get put on the shelves immediately. This year, what's going to happen is we've modified everything so that we're actually going to use the town common with the possibility of Center School being a backup location in case of rain, just to keep the food clean and dry. So you'll see a lot more commotion going on in town, but that way we'll get the food sorted for the food pantry, and then we'll be able to shuttle it over and drop it off on the loading dock for the permanent volunteers at Project Just Because to then bring it into the pantry.
Okay.
So it's a little different than usual.
Yeah, sure, certainly does sound different. Now, has the date been set this year?
Yes, the date is November 14th for the collection day. So Scouts will come out a week before on the 7th of November. They'll put flyers on mailboxes, mailbox posts specifically, because the mailbox would be federal property. So it'll be the posts or somewhere as close by it as we can attach a bag with a flyer in it. And if you have the flyer and would like to display it for everybody, they can get a preview of what we're going to send out.
All right. You sent that earlier. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go.
So this is the flyer that everyone will receive. It'll be in a Market Basket bag. Market Basket is kind enough to donate the bags for our drive every year. So we like to give them credit as far as sponsorship. And a lot goes into just this flyer alone. We have to contact Project Just Because to find out what they truly need each year. And it is different every year, so the list does change. Right now, what has really been the saving grace for them has been receiving Amazon gift cards all throughout this COVID situation. It has enabled them at a time when they couldn't receive private donations to bring food into the pantry. And you'll notice there's a list of corporate sponsors on there. Those are actually the businesses around town that were kind enough to make a donation to the Scouting for Food drive last year. We always run 1 year previous, just because that's the amount of time it takes the data to come in. So that's what you see on the flyer. So residents will receive that next week.
So out of curiosity, what do the corporate sponsors, what do they do?
So that they've made a monetary donation.
Okay.
And the donations can range anywhere from $25 to $1,000 from what I've seen over the years. So some businesses are very generous.
And that goes right to Project Just Because for the food
Yes.
bank, and they buy stuff?
It goes directly to the Hopkinton Food Pantry. So
Okay.
just to make the designation, anything from the food drive is a donation to the Hopkinton Food Pantry, which, although it's part of Just Because, it's specifically used for that silo.
Okay.
I will mention that our town, in order to get all these bags out all over town, it takes hundreds of scouts. And we've got the town divided up into 80 routes. So a route can contain anywhere from 50 houses to well over 100 houses. And certainly the addition of Legacy Farms has added a lot of volume and about 5 or 6 routes to our list recently.
Now, what does Legacy Farm have for mailboxes? Do they have like the big groups of them?
They have banks of mailboxes that are really lock boxes. So that was our first challenge. When we were finally able to contact Legacy Farms, we negotiated with them, and they actually have a slightly different flyer than the rest of the town. What their flyer allows them to do is it says they can put the donations out by their mailboxes, which some people do, or they can put it on their front porch. So the scouts that get those routes know that they have to check all the front porches as well for Legacy Farms.
I hope your bags are very unique and distinctive.
Well, they are, like I said, they are Market Basket bags.
Okay.
So, but we do have to be diligent in our search process as we're doing collections. And certainly we want to make sure, because there are some parts of town that have trash that day as well. So we have to be careful to make sure they're picking up food donations and not the wrong bag.
Right.
So yes.
You mentioned that you're attaching the flyers to the mail posts.
Yes.
If there's a place like Legacy Farms that has a bank of lock boxes, how do you handle that?
So they actually go on the door handle for Legacy Farms. So most of them have very nice screen doors, and we just loop the bag right through the door handle on the screen or the glass door.
That must be, I mean, every household in Hopkinton?
Yep, there's about 5,600 households.
That is a monumental task.
It's a big operation.
It really is. And you have 80 routes. How many scouts are involved?
So year to year, it's been anywhere from 300 to 600 scouts, depending on what our enrollment is.
Mm-hmm. That is really impressive. A lot of times I feel that it can be an unknown need. we don't really see hungry people, people who are food insecure wandering around. And when they are, people try really hard not to let that be known because
Mhm.
they have, shame or something like that. But in these past few years where things are difficult, Project Just Because has been a lifesaver. And
Absolutely.
they are so good at, bringing in stuff and getting it into the hands of people who need it. And they're so compassionate for the people, understanding that there's no shame in it. It's circumstance. And, you may be here one day and I may be there the next day because that's just the way this world is right now. And it's just so valuable. I think it's so exciting what you're doing. How long have you been doing this, Karen?
I've done something related to the food drive since probably 2002, when my oldest son joined Scouts. I started coordinating the Girl Scouts in 2007. And just 2 years ago, I took over as the townwide coordinator. We were very lucky to have Jack Ryan be our fearless leader for 12 years.
Okay.
So he left big shoes to fill.
Yeah. So you've been doing it for about 18 years now.
Yep.
How, can you tell me, how's it evolved? How has it changed? Or does this year's drive look very similar to one of the years in the early 2000s?
Um, well, let me start with the first question. How has it changed? When I first started doing the drive, the food pantry was located at the Woodville Baptist Church. So it was in their basement and it was quite small. So, and then from there, we've worked out of the Hopkinton Senior Center when Project Just Because had taken over. A couple of different locations on South Street where Project Just Because had their locations. And now this year will be the first at an outdoor location at the town common area.
Right.
So, and it was a huge concern to just have enough space so that everyone could be socially distant.
Yes.
One of the big differences this year compared to other years is that we have to make sure that we have enough space and we know who is where when, who is in contact with whom. We need to have that solid list for contact tracing, unless, in case we need to go back to the Board of Health and say one person has had an issue and here's where everyone was. In prior years, we've really prided ourselves on allowing as many scouts as possible to come help with the sorting process. But COVID-19 isn't quite giving us that same option this year. We just have to know who is where and when.
And along those lines, Karen, when you get the donations, is there special handling that you have to have? Do you have to clean the product before you store it? How does it go from the door handle out of the bag and get to Project Just Because?
So what we did discover in talking with the Board of Health is that the process of collecting the food from the mailbox area and bringing it in to be sorted is really a contactless process. We're not seeing people. We're just interacting with the bags. I've put out a set of guidelines that, Jim, you could show if you'd like to. What we recommend the scouts do. So clearly some of these guidelines we've had out every year. When you're dropping bags off, scouts never enter homes. They look first before entering or exiting cars. Using hazard lights are key. If there is an unfriendly situation, we make sure the scouts know that they don't have to drop a bag off if something is strange or unusual, or if there's an unfriendly dog. We don't want anyone putting themselves in danger. This year, we've added to our rules that we would like people to wear a mask in case they encounter people, and that we recommend that they use gloves. So, and the same thing applies as they're picking up the food, that we want them to have masks. You never know who you're going to run into. So it's always good to have it ready to wear. And again, we recommend that the bags be handled with gloves. It just keeps everybody safe. And it's a little bit of common sense. What we're doing now, and we haven't put together those guidelines yet as a committee, but what we're going to be doing is when people come to drop the food off, we're going to have the drivers and the scouts that picked up the food remain in their car, and our crew that's going to be at the common will then be responsible for taking the food out of the trunk or out of the back, and they will bring it over to the sorting stations. So we tried to make that as contactless as possible as well. In addition, anybody who checks in to do sorting on the common, we're going to go through a checklist very similar to what the Board of Health provides. This one just happens to be provided by Boy Scouts National, but this form will just list all the symptoms. Have you had any of this? You all have heard it at the doctor's offices, a lot of places you go. Have you had a cough within the last 2 weeks? Have you been in contact with anyone? The usual questions.
Yeah.
And we're going to go down that checklist as everyone comes in for a shift, just to make sure we have no surprises or to limit surprises.
I have a question looking at that checklist.
Sure.
Mentions that you only pick up bags on your route until after 3 o'clock when all bags are fair game.
That's correct. So for any scout will tell you, it's very disappointing if you get to your route and you find out that there are 0 bags on it because someone else has done the pickup. Even if you just find 2 or 3 bags, it makes a big difference. It's just the reward of all the work you put in for the drive. So that's why. But then there are cases where scouts do the route and miss things. So then that's why we say after 3 o'clock, we want to get everything in so that it can get sorted and get into the bins and over to the food pantry. So, and then to come back to the original question that Bob asked was, in talking to the Board of Health earlier at the beginning of the drive, we did not feel like the food had to sit for a certain period of time or needed to be cleaned. What we're going to do is sort it. It goes into bins by category. And then we have some trailers that are going to bring the food, the filled bins. We'll have to seal them with tape just to make sure that they stay closed. But these bins will get transported over to Project Just Because's loading dock and will be left there. It then can be up to their discretion, if they want to make sure that they sit for a couple of days before they get opened. That's certainly a possibility. But we will get everything we can to Project Just Because on the 14th.
Okay. Now, I'd like to go back to something that you mentioned. You mentioned that when you were involved in early years and it was at the First Community Church, Faith Community Church now, and you said it was smaller than now.
So it was actually the one in Woodville, the Woodville Baptist Church.
Oh, Woodville Baptist Church.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was just a small area in their basement.
Okay. And did you cover less of the town? What made it smaller? Smaller is just the space, or what we?
The food pantry was much smaller.
Oh,
the amount of families that were supported was much smaller. We certainly in those years didn't have legacy farms. We didn't have a lot of like the complex that's behind West Main Street and on the corner of Lumber.
Yeah,
that's a new complex. A lot of the roads in some of our developments, Hopkinton Highlands was half the amount it is now.
Yeah.
There are at least 5 or 10 other developments that have cropped up along the way through the years.
Right.
So,
did you always cover the entire town? Now there's just more people there?
We did cover the entire town always as scouts. And actually, in some of those years, we had many more scouts. Our numbers are down probably a good 20 to 25% compared to some of the other years.
Now, this is a joint effort for Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, correct?
Yes, even though nationwide, it's a Boy Scout program, in Hopkinton, for as long as I've been involved, it's always been covered by Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. And honestly, without the Girl Scouts, we couldn't pull it off because they cover at least a third of the routes, if not a little more. Just from a manpower standpoint alone, that's how our numbers break out. We have a lot of Girl Scouts.
Right. Now, does everything on the 14th gets picked up, goes to the common, gets packed, and goes to Project Just Because the same day?
Yes.
When does that day end?
Well, had we normally been sorting at Project Just Because, we are normally done by about 4:30 or 5 o'clock, and everything is cleaned up, packed up, swept up. This year might be a little different. We're not really sure how it's going to play out. We're targeting the same time frame, given the fact that we want all bags out by mailboxes by 10 a.m. Our pickup time is between 10 and 2, and then missed bags are picked up at 3 o'clock or later. Occasionally, other years we've had groups of kids say, well, I have this sport or that sport, and I know I'm not going to get to my route until 3 o'clock. So we'll put the word out, and we know to expect that amount of food to come in later. This year, there are not really as many sports running, so we don't anticipate that being such a challenge. And because we have to do more effort on the scheduling, we know that anybody who does have sports will have to work an earlier shift.
Now, the scouts that participate in this process, did they receive credit towards a merit badge?
So they get, depending on their rank, they can have volunteer service hours that apply to some of the ranks. It just depends on how many hours they need. For years and years, I've signed the form for the kids at the high school that need hours for Honor Society. They can count it towards that. Also, St. John's, some of their programs, the kids need hours for. So we give them credit for whatever they need it for.
And I'm sure they would do it anyway, but it's important to show that they got some.
Honestly, this is, of all the events throughout the year, this is the one that we get the biggest participation on.
It's really big, I can imagine, and that kind of thing, it's exciting to be part of something like that. It's exciting whether you're putting out the bag or, you're part of the scouts who are the literal people who are taking that food and bringing it to the place where it needs to be. Now, what do you do for metrics? How do you keep track? Do you do pounds? Do you do number of items? Do you track at all what the results of your project are?
I kind of inherited that process. So we know, and this year is going to be a little bit more of a struggle, but we know for when we're sorting a project Just Because, the size of the pile of food that comes in, because all the bags come in and they get put in one central location, we get this big pile. By 1:30, our pile is so big, we know that we're bringing in 8 tons of food. If it's, this was just an estimate that my predecessors figured out.
Okay.
If it's bigger than that, then we figure we're about 10 tons.
Okay.
And we scale down accordingly if it's less. So we'll
Right.
see what happens this year.
Right. Now you mentioned, did 56 households in Hopkinton?
5,600.
5,600.
5,600. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for correcting that. So 5,600. Average, what type of participation do you get? Do you count the number of bags that come in so it's like 25% of Hopkinton or something different?
Well, it's very hard to estimate. We've never succeeded in that particular realm. Some neighborhoods are much more generous than others. It varies from year to year as well. Some households put multiple bags out. Some put none. So, it's an average. We feel like the amount of food that comes in is our better gauge from a year to year standpoint.
Okay.
So
Have you had it? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
in the past 10 years, we haven't been below the 8-ton mark.
Okay.
That's great. Have you had feedback from Project Just Because? I know they take donations year round. What percentage of their donations does this equate to for them?
So this is a huge part of the food that gets them through the winter. I really don't know what percentage it is, but there's also monetary donations that can come in. Between the businesses and private donations last year, people were extremely generous. I believe the total was over $5,000. So, and that's, coming in from a big chunk of people, but businesses. One business I know donated $1,000, so that helps immensely. But beyond that, I know if we don't do this drive, then they're going to be panicking for the rest of the winter.
But the point is that this drive will provide them with food to be distributed for several weeks, if not months.
That's correct.
And is this aligned because of Thanksgiving, or is it aligned because of the season? Why do you pick now?
Like I said, our Mayflower Council is the one that always chooses the dates. And for all the years that I've been involved, it's always been the first or second week of November, depending on how the days play out. It helps immensely that it's aligned with Thanksgiving, but I don't know if that was why the original choice was made. So, and like I said, for 18 or so years, it's always been the same time frame.
Yeah. And describe for me the enthusiasm level of all the scouts who are involved. Is this a chore they check off, or is this something they're looking for? How is it going for them?
It kind of varies depending on the age group. But like I said, for this drive, we get many more kids volunteering than for some of the other events that we run. So if you take a Cub Scout den and you hand them a stack of bags, they have a ball running around the neighborhood and putting them on the posts. It's a little bit of a functional challenge for them to learn, and off they go. They're outside. They're loving doing it. And then, like I said, the picking up the bags is the reward. They say, oh, this is really cool. Look at how much food we got. The trunk is full. So, and the same goes with the Girl Scouts. It's you take a little daisy troop and you go downtown and you just walk around with them. This year, one other thing that we didn't get to do, I remember the years that it was a lot of fun to have the young Girl Scouts and the young Cub Scouts at Colella's.
Yeah.
When we used to have tables at the front and tables at the back, and they had a lot of fun just being outside there. Price Chopper has let us have a table ever since they've come to town. And this year, unfortunately, we ran into some challenges with the Girl Scout Council. And we are not going to be able to put a manned table out front of Price Chopper. We're going to have an unmanned table, and we hope we'll get some donations that way. But, it's just not the same as when you have the kids out there adding personality to the drive.
Right.
So.
Well, Karen, I got to say, I'm a little disappointed. I expected to get to some other topics because I love scouting. I've been to some meetings and I love what you all do. I love some of the integrity that you're instilling in the next generation coming up. But unfortunately, we talked so much about this because it was so fascinating that we need to have you come back so that we can talk some
Okay.
more. All right. It's been exciting. I'm really, really, really happy that you are doing this for our community and that we are able to do what we can to help get the word out there and let people know. And I wish that you guys have a great 7th and 14th of the month this year.
Thank you. We appreciate any wishes for good weather.
True. All right, Karen. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Okay. And it is now 2:30, which means that our Board of Health Director, Sean Mccollum, is in the house, or in the Zoom, as we should probably say now. So there's been a lot going on. And Sean, thank you so much for coming here.
That saying that there's a lot going on is an understatement, because I just got off of the governor's conference call, and he's issuing a revised stay-at-home advisory that goes into effect on Friday. So there'll be essentially, it's more or less like a curfew from 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night to 5 o'clock in the morning.
Mhm.
They'll be advising that businesses close at 9:30 p.m. They're reducing the gathering order so that no more than 10 indoors and 25 outdoors. And then he's gonna modify the existing face covering order. So it's face masks or face coverings all the time.
Okay.
So,
All right. So, John, I'm
Yeah.
going to get right to the heart of this, and let's just like pull this apart and talk this through. Okay.
I've been ripping Band-Aids all day.
Okay, good. John, what is going on? What
Well-
is going on?
Well, I mean, if this were a non-COVID year, we expect to see an increase in cold, flu, and other respiratory diseases as we get into the winter months. So we knew that it was coming,
Yeah.
because the start of the winter months is the start of the cold and flu season. And now when you add COVID in, the way COVID spreads, you had to believe that we were going to see an uptick in cases, and that's what we're seeing. But because we've done such a good job in Hopkinton since, really since day one, we're not seeing, knock on wood, to date, we haven't seen any evidence of community spread or any spread in the schools. So we're doing well there. But it's residents are going off to work, coming in contact with someone who's ill and bringing it home. They might be spreading it to a family member in the household. And it's staying there. We've seen, and I tell you, the majority of our cases are coming in that way, and those some of those instances have caused minor disruptions in school, and then we have the athletics related illnesses that caused more or less four or five issues at the school. But again, those were one-off. Someone contracted an illness from someone they were exposed to on their sports team. They didn't spread it in home, and there was no spread in the school. And one of the things that, some of the parents, I mean, I've been talking to a lot of parents lately. And one of the things that they had asked was if we could communicate or just talk about how much spread, and what's the evidence to support that there's no spread within the schools. So each one of these incidents that we've had, I think over the last month, we've probably sent just over 100 people to get tested for COVID, or just over 100 contacts to get tested for COVID. And not one of those contacts have tested positive. And that's a tribute to the fact that the mask or the face covering wearing, the distancing, and the general attention to hygiene and staying home when you're sick works. I mean, even though we're not at full capacity at school, there's still a lot of contact and it's working. So if we can just take what we're practicing in the school setting and apply it to, our home, I think we're going to be a lot better off. And I firmly believe that we should be able to move from, this yellow risk rating down to the green over the next 2 weeks. It's really just a matter of again, following the basics, staying home if you're sick. And if you're sick, do not hesitate to call the health department for advice, because in a couple instances, we've actually prevented, potential spread because we've had these conversations up front. And it's, no, actually, if you've been advised to go to the doctor to get tested, it's probably a better idea not to allow anybody in your household to go to school or go to work until you know what those test results are going to be. And it's these simple steps, and it's the stuff that you go through when you fill out your attestation each day. It's just paying attention to that. I think that's going to really help us stay safe.
I will admit, I was one of those people who thought to myself, when you first started talking about this attestation, it's just kind of like, you're just asking a few questions and that's it. It's amazing how when you're asked that, it does focus your concentration and it makes you think about it. And I think that has a real value to it. One of the things that I was hearing about a concern as the weather turned colder and people are congregating more or are indoors more. Can you talk to that? Where are people indoors more, or is it that they're indoors in their house more?
So people are they're indoors. There's a great article that I'm probably gonna post to Josh and have him post it on the website about how, as you're sitting in a room like I am now, if I were COVID positive, the amount of virus particles in the room would slowly be accumulating in the room. And then if someone came in, it might not be that they're in the room for more than a couple minutes, but because I've filled up the room with virus particles, that they're getting a high effective dose of virus, and that might be just enough of a dose to get them ill. And that's this thing, during the warmer months, the windows will be open, so the virus is, spreading outside and it's diluted. So we don't have dilution. We're staying put in single rooms more often. Our homes are designed to be tighter and more energy efficient, and that just doesn't allow the virus to disperse. And then just because we're all craving contact, that I'm hearing stories of the children, just children that would be isolated in their rooms, playing video games or whatever, are now hanging out more with their parents, and they're watching shows together, they're playing games together, and it's just, there's a lot more contact. So it's, this is just what we're used to seeing again, when it comes to flu and colds and, other respiratory illnesses. And that's what we're seeing now. And, when we look at the schools, the schools have increased their ventilation, they've improved the HVAC systems, but so that helps. And then they're also practicing distancing and then wearing face coverings in the school setting. So that's why we're not seeing the spread in the school. And I don't know that we're going to go as far as it's really impractical to think that we would need to enforce any mask wearing in the home or anything like that. But if someone in your family is sick and you don't know if they've got COVID or not, it might be an option to start, or a consideration to wear a mask, because we know that, the virus is concentrating. We know that there's a higher risk in the home. So in that instance, when someone is feeling ill, they should wear a mask until, the person who's ill gets their test results back.
Which is, what are we talking? 1 to 4 days?
1 to 2.
1 to 2 days.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think it's kind of, wow, I'm gonna wear a mask in my own house. But if it's for a short time frame while you are awaiting a result, because I think that's fine. I was interested when you were talking about kids in sports, and there was a case, or one case or two cases or whatever it was, but at least someone where a student or somebody had that, and it did not spread in their home. I find that really interesting, because everything we've ever heard about COVID-19, basically, if you look at it, you're going to catch it. It's just so contagious. And I'm interested if you have any knowledge or thoughts on how likely is it? Like, what are the chances that if somebody has that virus, and they're contagious for a few days before they start exhibiting symptoms? To me, it just feels like, well, if somebody gets it, that's it. The whole house is going down.
Yeah,
But
no.
what do you think?
No, and we're, as we'd been kind of discussing in prior, shows, that we needed to start putting plans together, because if the colleges start shipping sick kids back, we could be in trouble. And that very thing is happening right now. We've got 3 different colleges have started shipping students back to Hopkinton. And so we've had to put together plans, with the families. We'll bring the child into the back door, we'll put them in this bedroom that's in the basement. They can have that bathroom allocated to them. The sibling that is the most angst-ridden, with respect to this, will deliver the sandwich to the door, knock 3 times, and we've staged the whole system, and it's working. Like I was just in, and there are certain individuals in town that get tested on a routine basis because of work, and 2 of them are kind of in this situation. So each week I go, oh, it's Monday, let me go see what so-and-so's results are. And they keep on resulting negative. And their other children are resulting negative. So we know it can be done. And I was just talking to someone who's in a very small home. And it was funny because this sibling, it's like he's in prison. I deliver him a ham sandwich or macaroni and cheese and SpaghettiOs, and I knock, but the sibling and parents have been able to keep themselves healthy by staying isolated. Each one has a separate bathroom, and they, ill child keeps the window cracked open a bit. So, getting someone sick in the home isn't, it isn't the end of the world. So,
Oh,
and it's
in
just,
that
and
in that family, do they wear masks when they know their child is infected?
if they, if they've got to do any, if there's going to be any contact, they have masks in the room. And like today, I was on the phone with a family, and one of the children were going to go out to get tested. Or actually, the one uh, who had tested positive a while back was going to go out and get tested because that's what the school had asked. So they had it all staged. They had the masks went into the room before the child arrived back from college. They had gloves in there. The child, knocked to say, "I'm coming out," and everybody scattered. The parent who was watching them leave and get to the car, had a face covering on. They just Lysol wiped the doorknobs, and they said it's a change. It might be an extra minute's worth of work. And every one of the families has joked about putting the plate out at the door and knocking. That's just one of these common, kind of chuckles that every family has.
Yeah.
But these are the steps that are working to keep everybody safe, and so we know it can be done. And then we were talking about attestation. We had an almost oops in the municipal offices. And in this one case, the employee was at home. They were doing some work at home, and they started sneezing, and they attributed it to the work they were doing. And then someone came home and said, "My God, that candle, I just, they don't like the smell of the candle." And the employee that was working went, "That's funny. I can't smell that. Oh my God, I can't smell the candle." And when, because of attestation, went, "This is a key symptom. I'm going to go get tested. I'll see you later." And because they were so used to filling it out every day and so in tune with the symptoms and so in tune with their own body, they, we got that call, it's the call that Casey and I hate, it typically comes in at 4:30 to 5 o'clock, when you've got a lot of work to do at home. And you're like, well, wait. So they really haven't had any exposure except for this day. And because everybody was doing the right thing, we just said, well, we want this person and this person to get tested. And then everybody in that larger group tested negative. And again, it's, even though that they had worked, 6 feet apart for 8 to 10 hour shifts, being distanced, wearing the face covering protected anybody from getting ill. And we only had one person who was out, and they've now returned back. And it's what helps makes our job a little easier. And I'm happy to announce that we're actually going to bring attestation into the schools finally. That'll be a huge step. I mean, they're doing a good job, but we've said, if we found opportunities to bring, systems into the school, and we thought it could make a big difference, we would do so. And so, the 2 college kids that I've got working for me just started uploading the classroom data today.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be a huge difference.
Who is doing the attestations? Who would be filling that out?
The parents of the younger kids. I mean, I do it every day for my kids, just like I do it every day for work. So it's, I like in the morning I get up, I find a free minute and I just, no, there's no fever, no symptoms, no one in the family is sick, we haven't traveled. And it's that set of checks and balances. And like I say, my kids, they go to a Catholic school in Boston. So they're in a really high risk area. But everybody's following the rules. And, they've had 2 cases in their school. But, they're using attestation. And in their case, it was, they had gone, a family had gone to a family gathering. Someone at the family gathering had COVID and got one of the children sick. Actually, that's, I think, what happened in both families. So, and it gets to what the governor's been talking about the last couple of weeks is, just these big family gatherings are problematic. And, we got a bunch of calls Friday, Saturday, and Sunday about Halloween parties. And maybe the one that we were the most concerned with happened to be the one that I was maybe the most pleased by, because they actually, they were practicing attestation at the door.
Mm.
They were taking temperatures of every person that walked into the house at the door. They kept a record of everybody that attended the event. They kept the numbers below the governor's, event requirement. And they had the windows open to increase ventilation. They did it all right. So, as I said, I'm quite likely shaved a year off their life when I called. They, when we talked it through, I was like, geez, I wish everybody was like this, but, they're one of them's, they deal with this every day. And they were like, the last thing they wanted to be is that family that contributed to, they wanted to provide an experience, but they didn't want to be that person that caused an issue at the school.
Mm.
So
yeah, there's a town that's not Hopkinton that's pretty close by. Driving down the road, they were having a party. There was a bouncy house at this party. I don't know what the thought process was behind that.
Yeah.
One question I wanted to ask you is, there's been a lot of talk about pandemic fatigue, and it's been going on so long, and we've been hoping that, things could loosen up. And have you seen pandemic fatigue, or what's your observations?
Yeah, I mean, I'm exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
Like I probably put in 22 hours this weekend. Yeah, that's conservatively. I took time out to take my kids trick-or-treating. But that's because we had, I took the Hopkinton design. We introduced the Hopkinton design to my neighborhood group. And in my neighborhood, you're either a young family with little kids, or you're actually my age or older, and your kids have all gone off to college and whatever. And we put together a really well-structured event where we controlled the risk. And there was a bouncy house, and everybody in the neighborhood, like they cut across the street, like they totally avoided that one home. And even my 9-year-old went over because the person, they were interested in seeing my daughter's costume, and my 5-year-old was like, no, they're not following the rules. Call them right out. And it's funny because, I think the younger kids are getting it. But they, like, you can see it in them. They're tired. They, like my kids at least get to see their friends every day. But it's not the same. I would love to get together, with my brothers, and then more with my father, but it's just, it's just not, it's not safe,
Right.
And it's that maybe it's not necessarily maybe the fatigue. It's just, there's this longing to get back together and see people and interact with people.
Yeah.
And I enjoy, like today I'm at home because I didn't want to lose the half hour of getting out the door and then coming back. I mean, it's just, my time is really precious right now.
Yeah.
But I actually look forward to going into work because I get to, see and, talk to people. And that's one of the things that I think people are really missing. And that's what's pushing them to kind of get cute. And then, I was saying that even some of the people that, we had one individual who took a trip down to Florida just to get away, and they got caught up because I think Homeland Security determined that someone on their plane was positive. So their whole plane got quarantined. And then that actually happened twice. Someone else went on a vacation out of the country and the entire plane got quarantined.
We need to rent a private island. That's what we need to do.
Yeah. And paddle out there.
Yeah, exactly. But like, I understand, my parents were very much thinking about Thanksgiving this year, and what was possible, what could we do? And my wife was really like, wow, what could we do? What could be possible? And then one day my mom called me up and said, hey, I'm canceling Thanksgiving. I was like, oh, really? Because she had, seen the numbers and she saw the information, and it's just too risky at this particular time.
Yeah.
I did want to get this last question in before the time is up, and I know it's putting you on the spot a little bit, so feel free to say whatever you can. You are not a reactionary person. You're very calm. And I'm curious, from your perch, from where you sit, and you're looking at the way things are going in Massachusetts, is it a concern? Is it a reminder of what we should be doing? Is it something that was expected, and what's coming down from your office and from Governor Baker's office, the appropriate and good response, and you're very comfortable? Where do you stand, Sean?
I'm definitely concerned, but, and it's consistent with what the governor said today. We expected the bump. We both believe that sometimes it's, you need to experience a little pain, it's, you burn yourself on the stove, do it again. It's that, wow, we're seeing these numbers that we haven't seen since May. It's time, it's giving everybody pause to think about, all right, we've done this before, but we can do this, but we actually know how to do it better. So it's a little concerning. I do believe that we are in a place where I don't know that we'll go back to the unshaded metric, but I firmly believe that we can get back and sustain Hopkinton in the green. And it's just, and that's why, like, we're focused on some targeting. Like, we've looked at our data. I've got a biostatistician looking at all of the data since August to, today, so that we can identify these targeted incidents and then get that messaging out so that, so that we can stop some of these really, a lot of this spread in town is just by changing one little decision, could have prevented an illness.
Okay.
And so I'm optimistic that we can get back down, and I was on the phone with Framingham and Ashland today, Framingham's, it's going to be a bit more of a challenge because of the numbers that they have to pull back. But,
Right.
the governor's brought in resources there. He's brought in resources to Holliston to help Holliston out. And
Okay,
so,
listen, we got to leave it there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We'll leave it at optimistic. I look forward to talking to you
Yeah.
next time, Sean.
yes, I've got to go and get on that call with the DPH.
All right.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for watching the Hangout Hour. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.